Welcome back to the Book Nook, everybody. Today we're diving into a book that you, our listener, suggested to us.
Oh, cool.
It's Moonwalking with Einstein, The Art and Science of Remembering Everything by Joshua Foer.
I love that book.
Yeah, and what we found so interesting about it, and what we hope you'll find interesting too, is that it's got a lot of really practical takeaways about how to remember things better. So if you ever feel like,
Yeah.
your brain's a sieve and you're constantly forgetting things, this is the deep dive for you. We're going to kind of pull out some of the core techniques that Foer explores, understand the principles behind them,
Go.
and hopefully that'll get you thinking in ways that make information stick a little bit better. So we're going to explore how memory champions actually achieve their feats. And we're also going to talk about how you can apply some of their secrets to your own life.
I love that. You know what I think is fascinating about the book is that right from the start, Foer encounters all these memory competitors, like people who can memorize hundreds of random digits or entire decks of cards,
Oh, yeah.
and they insist that they don't have photographic memory.
Hmm.
You know, like Ed Cook. He's
Yeah.
a big name in the memory world.
Mm-hmm.
He can recite like 252 random digits.
Wow.
But he's adamant that anyone can do it. It's not about some special talent you're born with.
And it really makes you rethink, like,
Right.
what's possible.
Totally.
And you hear someone like that who can do something that seems almost impossible, and they say, oh, I'm just average.
Mm-hmm.
You start to wonder,
Yeah.
okay, so if it's not about being born with some incredible memory, what is it? What's the secret?
Well, Foer discovers it's all about technique. Like, there's this 2,500-year-old mnemonic technique called the memory palace.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
And legend has it that it originated with this guy, Simonides of Chios,
Hmm?
who, after this banquet hall collapsed, could actually identify the bodies based on where each guest had been sitting.
Really?
Yeah. So it's basically about creating vivid images in your mind
Oh.
and placing them in familiar locations.
So instead of just like drilling information into your head through repetition,
Exactly.
which can get really boring,
It's so tedious.
and it doesn't always work.
Yeah, exactly.
You're saying that the memory palace gives you a more engaging and effective way to learn?
I think so, yeah.
It's interesting. Tony Buzan, he's a big proponent of memory techniques. He compares the brain to a muscle that gets stronger with use, so you can actually improve your brain's fitness and nimbleness.
I like that. That's a good analogy.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to think about, and it's not just anecdotal, right?
No, not at all.
Our brains are really good at remembering visual and spatial information.
Oh, yeah.
Think about, like, navigating your house in the dark,
Mhm.
where everything is.
That's your spatial memory.
Exactly. And Ed Cook, he actually demonstrated how strong our visual memory is.
How do you do that?
With this picture recognition test.
Oh, yeah.
So he showed people thousands of images, and they could remember them really well,
Even with like subtle differences between the pictures.
even with really subtle differences.
That's amazing.
It was almost effortless.
Wow, that's pretty surprising.
It is surprising.
And it makes you wonder, listener. You know, studies have shown that we have this incredible capacity for visual memory. People can remember tons of images with high accuracy, even if they've only seen them for a short time. So you already have this powerful memory system,
Mm-hmm.
but you might not be using it in the best way when you're trying to remember other kinds of information.
Like names or facts.
Yeah, exactly.
And that brings us back to the memory palace.
Okay.
So Foer talks about this guy, S, who was studied by this neuroscientist, Alexander Luria. And S had this seemingly limitless memory. And you know what his method was?
What was it?
He organized information spatially.
Spatially.
Yeah, so like along routes that he knew really well.
Oh, interesting.
So for words or ideas, he would create these vivid, almost surreal images. And then he would place them mentally at specific spots along these routes.
Like a mental map.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
So he was taking abstract information, things that don't naturally have like a location
Well,
or a visual form, and he was anchoring them to concrete places that were already really strong in his mind.
I see. So he's using his existing spatial memory
Yeah, exactly.
to organize abstract information?
Mhm.
That's fascinating.
But then you see someone like S or these memory competitors doing these incredible things, and you wonder, do they have different brains than us?
Right. Like, are they wired differently?
Yeah, and Foer actually looks into the neuroscience of this,
Okay.
and he talks about Eleanor Maguire, who did the study on London cab drivers.
London cab drivers.
Yeah, they have to memorize vast networks of streets.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
And what she found was that their hippocampus which is the part of the brain that's crucial for spatial navigation,
Hmm.
was actually larger than average.
So their brains had physically changed.
Yeah,
That's a great example of neuroplasticity.
right, the brain's ability to change
Mm.
and adapt based on experience.
Exactly.
But here's the thing.
What's that?
McGuire then did research specifically on memory athletes.
Oh, wow. So like the people we're talking about,
Yeah, and she found that their brains weren't actually structurally different
real.
than the average person's.
Mhm.
Their hippocampi weren't bigger or anything.
So it's not that they're physically different.
Nope.
It's something else.
It seems like it's the result of them constantly using these learned techniques.
Wow. So it really is about training your brain.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And then there's this really interesting concept called the Baker-Baker paradox.
The Baker-Baker paradox. What's that?
So it basically says that you're more likely to remember that someone's profession is baker
Oh.
than that their last name is Baker.
But it's the same word.
I know, right?
That's weird.
It's because the word baker is connected to all these other things in your mind. Like you picture someone kneading dough
Oh,
or the smell of bread, maybe a white apron.
you're making me hungry.
But the name Baker, it's usually just a label attached to a face.
Right.
So if you forget the face, you forget the name. But with the profession, you have all these different ways to remember it.
I see. Like you could think about food
Mm-hmm.
and that would lead you to baker.
Exactly.
So how can we use this to remember people's names?
It sounds like we need to create those same kind of connections
Oop.
for names. So like turning baker into an image of someone actually baking. Or Foer even suggests making Jenkins rhyme with thinking
That's funny.
and picturing the person thinking.
So you're making it more concrete.
Yeah, exactly. Linking it to something memorable.
That makes sense.
And the memory palace itself has this really long history
Oh, yeah.
that goes way beyond the story of Simonides. It's this idea that you can use space as a way to organize your memories. And it really took off and evolved over centuries.
That's true. Sid.
And people started calling it the art of memory.
BR's memory.
Yeah, and they realized that by turning abstract information into these vivid, often bizarre images and placing them strategically in a familiar mental space, you could create this really powerful system
Wow.
for remembering just about anything.
So like how do you actually build a memory palace?
Foer describes how head cook taught him to make his first one, using his childhood home.
Oh,
So you start by mentally walking through a place you know really well and picking out specific locations like the front door, the coat rack, the living room sofa, things like that. And those become your loci.
your loci.
Yeah, the places where you're going to put your memories.
Okay.
And then for each item on your list, you create this vivid and unusual image and you place it at one of those locations.
Nice.
And the weirder or more emotional the image, the better it sticks.
That makes sense.
And then when you want to remember the list, you just mentally retrace your steps. Foer says that when he did this, the images just popped back into his mind.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, it seems really intuitive.
Our brains are good at remembering journeys and the things we see along the way.
Mm-hmm.
So the memory palace is kind of like a mental journey
Yeah, exactly.
where each stop triggers a memory. That's so clever.
But if you want to remember a lot of information, you need more than one memory palace, right? Oh, that's right. You need more space.
yeah,
Like mental real estate.
exactly. And Foer started collecting architecture.
Cooking architecture.
Yeah, so like mapping out other familiar places in his mind.
Oh, okay, I get it.
And Ed Cook apparently has hundreds of these mental storehouses.
Hundreds. That's incredible.
And this all points to the fact that memory isn't just this fixed thing. It's a skill
Skill.
that we can improve. Foer talks about Anders Ericsson and his skilled memory theory,
Okay.
which says that our memory is way more flexible than we think
Mm-hmm.
and that we can improve it with practice.
And there's evidence for this.
Yeah, like there's this guy, SF,
Okay.
who started out with a normal digit span, like remembering maybe 7 digits.
Yeah.
But through training,
Yep.
he was able to remember over 80.
80 digits. That's amazing.
It is pretty amazing.
So what we think of as our limits are actually not really limits at all.
Yeah, and it all comes down to how we approach it.
I see.
And there's this idea of chunking information.
Chunky. Yeah, so like experts in different fields, like chess masters,
Uh-huh.
they can remember really complex situations because they see patterns,
Yeah.
meaningful chunks, instead of just individual pieces. So instead of remembering a random string of numbers like 17762023,
Right.
you could chunk it into 2 years. 1776 and 2023.
That's so much easier.
Yeah, and you can do this with anything.
Well, I can apply this to my own life.
Absolutely. You just got to look for ways to group information
Okay.
into more meaningful units. And Erickson says it's not just about any practice, it's about deliberate practice.
Deliberate practice. What's that?
It's focused and strategic, and it pushes you beyond your comfort zone. You got to
Yeah.
seek feedback and analyze your mistakes.
So it's not just going through the motions.
No, it's got to be intentional.
That makes sense.
And Ed Cook had this really interesting thought about memory and time.
Oh, tell me about that.
He suggested that a life full of memories
Mm.
actually makes time feel slower.
Really? How's that?
Well, our lives are basically a collection of memories. Right.
And when we have lots of vivid memories, we feel like that time lasted longer. But as we get older, life can become more routine, and we form fewer distinct memories, and then we feel like time is speeding up.
I see.
So by actively building memories, we might actually be enriching our experience of time.
That's a really cool idea.
It is.
It's also interesting to think about how our relationship with memory has changed over time.
Oh, yeah.
Like, our brains evolved in this environment
Yeah.
where remembering things was crucial for survival.
Right.
But now, we rely so heavily on external memory aids.
Like books and computers.
Exactly. It's like we've outsourced our memory.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
And in oral cultures,
Mm-hmm.
before writing was widespread,
Yeah.
the art of memory was essential.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Professional memorizers were like the keepers of their culture. They would use techniques like repetition and rhythm and rhyme
Yeah.
to preserve their history and traditions.
It was all passed down orally.
Exactly.
And those techniques were super sophisticated.
Yeah, they had to make information really memorable so it could be shared and preserved.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible.
And even when writing became more common, it was a different world.
How so?
Well, early texts didn't have spaces or
Really?
punctuation,
Wow.
and people often read aloud. And books were more like memory prompts than sources of information.
Interesting.
So memory was still super important.
Even with writing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And over time, memory training techniques became relevant for all sorts of people.
Oh, just scholars.
Not just scholars. There was this guy, Peter of Ravenna,
Okay.
and he helped to show that these techniques were valuable for everyday life.
That's cool.
And then there were these really imaginative concepts, like Giulio Camillo's theater of memory.
Theater of memory.
Yeah.
What was that?
It was this idea for a physical structure that would hold all of human knowledge,
Wow.
and you could access it through symbolic images.
That's ambitious.
It is. It's like the ultimate memory palace.
So it never actually got built.
I don't think so.
But it's a cool idea.
Yeah. And in more modern times, we have systems like the major system,
Okay.
which converts numbers into sounds and then into words or images, and the PAO system, which memory athletes use to memorize things like cards.
At incredible speed.
Yeah. These are all based on the same principles of visualization and association, but they're more structured.
I see there was like refined techniques.
Exactly. And Foer actually learns these techniques himself.
Really?
He trains with Ed Cook, builds his own memory palaces, and even competes in memory championships.
So he put it all into practice.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So listener, we hope this deep dive has given you some ideas for how you can improve your memory. The key takeaway here is that it's not about being born with some special ability. It's about learning and applying these techniques.
Yeah.
There are so many strategies out there, from the ancient memory palace
Yeah.
to these modern systems, and you can start using them right away.
To remember more things. Yeah, like names and facts. And even deepen your understanding of the world. And we've just scratched the surface here. So if you want to really delve into these techniques, we highly recommend reading Moonwalking with Einstein.
It's a great book.
Yeah, it's a fascinating journey into the world of memory.